Hi, Catherine here, bringing you this month's exclusive sleep tip. And this month we're going to be talking about clock changes. Just on Sunday we've got the dreaded clock changes. Now before we all became parents, we'd be really excited about this time of year because we're falling back, which should mean that we get an extra hour in bed because our clocks are going backwards. Except when we're parents, unfortunately this isn't really how it works. So what does that mean for your child or toddler? What that means is that their circadian rhythms are still going to be working in the same way. So if your child wakes up at 7 a.m, their potential new wake up time is going to probably be 6 a.m. Now, if you're already dealing with early rising, which I consider to be before 6 a.m, let's say your child usually wakes up at 5:30, you're going to be looking at a 4:30 start, which is not as fun as having an extra hour in bed. So what we're going to do is we want to be looking at making a plan now so that we can help your child to adjust to the new timings and minimise your stress and your exhaustion as well. So the first thing I'd like to do is for you recommend sleep expectations, which is how I work with all my clients. Let's set realistic expectations. So firstly and honestly, these clock changes, even though it's just by an hour, will affect your child, and it will be different for each children because children aren't robots. They're tiny little people, and no matter how small the changes for an hour, it's going to unsettle them, and probably up to 10 days after the clock change. But what we can do by making plans now and making adjustments now, small adjustments, we can actually minimize the stress for them and your family as well. So the first tip I have for you as a parent, and it might seem really obvious, but I've been there with a child that's been waking up multiple times at night, early rising, no naps, overtiredness, and I know how stressful it is. So the first thing I recommend is, as parents, make sure you get to bed earlier than normal, because your child may be waking up earlier, and we want you to be in the strongest place possible, because whilst we're all spinning plates as a busy parent, we want to make sure that you're well rested, because let's face it, when we're well rested, it's a lot easier to deal with an overtired child than when we're not. In terms of what tips you can do to help your child from now, the first thing I'd say is make sure your child's got lots of exposure to daylight, especially in the morning. Daylight is so important for sleep because it releases the hormone cortisol, which tells us when to be awake, and in turn, when it's dark, that helps, it signals the release of melatonin, the sleepy hormone. So make sure your child is outside every single day, which is what I recommend my clients anyway, because daylight is so important for helping and improving sleep as well. If your child is weaned and you're at home with your child, you can also look at slowly adjusting meal times. And what I mean by this, let's say your baby or toddler eats at 7:30 in the morning for breakfast. Tomorrow, try and transition it to 7:40, 7:45, which allows you to transition all the other meals at the time of the day. You can continue this in 10 to 15 minute increments each day, and if you're worried that your child is going to be hungry, I always recommend to all of my clients that your child has a snack in between meals anyway, so just give them a small snack to make sure they're not going to get really hungry as well. In terms of bedtimes, so we want to minimise overtiredness for the whole family. You can start preparing and adjusting your child's body clock tonight, and it's really important to do this gradually, and the reason for this is overtiredness. We all know this causes early rising, and we might be dealing with that anyway, so we don't want even more early rising, bedtime resistance, and frequent night wakings as well. So we want to do this in a really gradual process. So let's say your child has napped well during the day and goes to bed, as an example, at 7 o'clock. On day one, you can look to move the bedtime to 7:15, so 15 minutes later, and then by 15 minutes per day until Sunday. However, as I said, I know if you've got a child that hasn't napped well, that might be a little bit of a nightmare, because what we don't want is to make bedtime drastically later, which if you've got a child that hasn't slept very well during the day, then even just 15 minutes might be too much. So we want to be really gentle here. So we want to move bedtime later, let's say by 10 minutes every 2 days. So if they usually go to bed at 7, you make it 7:10 for days 1 and 2, and 7:20 for days 3 and 4 as an example. And you continue this for 7 to 10 days after the clock change. If you're at home during the day with your child rather than your child being in childcare, you can also adjust nap times as well in the same way. It's really important as well you stick to the same routines and set in terms of bed and nap time routines as well, because with any change, consistency for children is absolutely key. And if you're already sleep coaching your child, then my biggest tip is to, if they do wake up early or unsettled in relation to their sleep, stick to your chosen sleep coaching method, and this will help them settle over time. I hope that helps with the daylight savings clock changes, and I'll see you next month with the new exclusive sleep tip.